Feminists have criticised 100 prominent French women after they signed a letter saying that men are being unfairly targeted when it comes to sexual harassment claims. Well, to talk to us more about this, France 24's Lisa Nesselson joins me on the set. Lisa, will you talk us through, first of all, what the letter actually says?
Okay, well, I haven't had time to read any of the outcry or the rebuttals. My primary text is the actual letter, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to understand in French. I don't know if it's been poorly translated, but I would have no qualms about signing this letter. The very first line is rape is a crime. But they go on to say that attempts at seduction, however awkward or aggressive, are not. And we are in the process, at least in the English-speaking world, a great deal, of criminalizing the very idea of hitting on someone who does not want to be hit on, as if you could magically know that. There's a way to do that. There's a way to not do that, of course, and there always has been. But, of course, now this very carefully thought-out, well-reasoned essay with examples written by some very, very prominent people and signed by some very prominent people has been reduced in headlines and sound bites to Deneuve says, okay for men to hit on women. So what they're saying here is that it's never okay to be violent. It's never okay to be inconsiderate. But it goes hand in hand. If you have the right to say no, which you always do, then somebody else has the right to try and entice you or convince you otherwise. So if someone comes up to me and says, hey, what's your sign? I can either say, please go away. I can say, does that work? Or I can say, I'm a Gemini. What are you? How do you know if you don't try? And so they're saying that this sort of baby with the bathwater business is leading to censorship of art. There are people who say, this painting offends me. It's of a prepubescent girl and she seems to be in a lascivious pose. But until last week, that museum, that piece of art was in a museum and everyone acknowledged that it was art and not offensive. And even if it was offensive, that was your problem, not the art's problem. Censorship of films, of language, and of course, of the way men and women can relate to each other. So this letter gives good examples and I don't see any reason why they should be embarrassed or feel like they're over the hill and don't get it.
Well, you touched on sound bites there. This is certainly one of the sound bites or one of the headlines that is coming out. Deneuve says it's okay to hit on women. It's okay to chat them up, as we'd say in the UK. Deneuve is a huge movie star here, and she's probably the most prominent person, I suppose, or the most well-known individual to have signed that letter, albeit there are many others who are well-known. She's a woman of a certain age. What do you think in terms of the generational approach to this? Because we've seen a lot of younger women up in arms, rightly so in many respects over this, but there's another, reaction to this coming from a woman of a certain age in France.
That's an excellent question, but I think we'd do well to look at Catherine Deneuve's life and how she's lived it. She has been modern, contemporary, completely taking responsibility for herself and her behavior every step of the way. She's been in movies since she was a teenager. She was a young unwed mother, what we would call an unwed mother, and she said, so what? I loved, the father of my child at that moment, and, we have a great kid. Every step of the way, and also something that I don't know if this has been brought up elsewhere, but when I learned of it years ago, impressed me enormously. In 1971, here in France, there was something called the Manifesto of the 343. That was 343 women who affixed their names to a text written by Simone de Beauvoir stating that they had had an abortion, when abortion was completely illegal. It was published in Le Nouvel Observateur. The women admitted they had had abortions, so it follows that they had had sex. And here's some of the people. Catherine Deneuve, Agnès Varda, Jean Moreau, Micheline Prel, Françoise Sagan, and Marguerite Duras. Now, that's a very impressive list of talented women.
Indeed.
They were dubbed sluts at the time. And interestingly, one document that circulated but was never published said, I declare that I was an accomplice to a woman who aborted, and the men who signed include François Truffaut. So not that long ago, some of the members of the current wave of feminists said that they should stop calling this the Manifesto of the Sluts. And Jean Moreau, who's no longer with us, but who, piped up and said, no, I was proud of being a slut then, and I insist on continuing to be one. Simone Signoret called them up and said, why didn't you include me? And what's great about this is not that women had abortions, but that they couldn't go after that many famous people. And so 3 years later, abortion became legal in France. So this is a discussion about sexual harassment, but sexual assault. No one is saying sexual assault has ever been okay, will ever be okay. They're saying a certain flirtation flirtatiousness is part of French life. It should be part of life everywhere. And when I think about the fact that in Saudi Arabia, it's not going to be until this coming March that an unaccompanied woman will be able to go to the movies by herself, because the idea is that men are, are beasts. They have some impulse that they can't possibly control. So the women who have written this are saying that the sexual impulse by its very nature is wild, and there's no reason to try and legislate that beyond reason.
All right, Lisa Nesselson, thank you very much for shedding some light on that letter, because, as you say, it's being interpreted in all sorts of ways. Thank you.